Good morning. This morning we're talking with Bishop Neal Buckon. He's the bishop for the Archdiocese for the Military Services of the United States of America. Bishop Buckon was born in Cleveland, Ohio, the second of 7 children. He has undergraduate degrees from John Carroll University, which is right across the street, as well as 2 bachelors of arts. He has a master's degree in church history from St. Mary's Seminary here in Cleveland, and also a Master of Divinity. Your Excellency, good morning, and thank you for being with us.
Diane, it's great to be here.
So let's begin. What drew you to the military service? What inspired you to want to serve?
Well, I think there were a couple of factors. One would be family. So my grandfather, my mother's father, had served in the First World War, and upon being discharged from the Army, he was given his citizenship. And my father, after graduating from high school, entered the Navy, and that was during the Second World War. And upon discharge from the Navy, he used the GI Bill to attend John Carroll University. And also patriotism. You know, when I was growing up in the 60s, I remember President Kennedy saying, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And as a young boy, well, that kind of inspired me to think about doing something for my country. And so I wanted to come and serve the country. And so love of country and the desire to serve. I think without knowing it back then, I had a vocation for service. And so many career servicemen and women, they like to think of themselves as living out their vocation of service. So I entered the military and then kind of realized, well, I also had a vocation to serve God and country. I left, went into the seminary, and then returned as chaplain.
Tell us a little bit about the Archdiocese of the military. Why is there a distinct diocese, archdiocese, just for military personnel and their families?
Well, it goes back to 1917, Diane. The First World War was exactly that. It was the first experience of something of that magnitude, and the church was wondering, how do we respond to this? And so at that time, Pope Benedict XV, he charged the Cardinal Archbishop of New York with the pastoral care of all Catholic military personnel serving in the United States Armed Forces and heading over to Europe as a part of the American Expeditionary Force. And so he created, with the other bishops of the United States, this War Council, the Catholic War Council, which kind of evolved into what we have today as the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. And so the church in the United States found this as the best way forward back in 1917. But in 1985, it was Pope John Paul II, now we know him as St. John Paul II, he created our archdiocese, not only for our country, but for other countries around the world, to have a military ordinariate that would be providing Catholic-specific ministry to the Catholic faithful in the military services. And so you might think of ourselves as a relatively young archdiocese, 1985 until now, so 34 years.
And in the United States, are there multiple bishops within the Archdiocese?
Yes. Well, our Archbishop for the military services, he is the shepherd for all the Catholic faithful serving in the United States Armed Forces, and also the veterans who visit our 153 Veteran Affairs hospitals and all the cadets at the military academies. He has 4 bishops who are auxiliary bishops. And since we have a worldwide mission, well, we stay very busy. So we have military bases in 30 different countries. We have military personnel assigned and serving our country overseas in maybe about 142 different countries. And so we've created 4 vicariates. I'm the vicar for the West, the Western region, serving and visiting military installations in 18 states. I visit Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard facilities throughout the year. So about 95 installations in 18 states, and I also go to the country of the Republic of the Marshall Islands.
How would you categorize, so these men and women that want you to come to Alaska, how would you describe, they have a unique lifestyle and call to serve. Would you describe their spiritual journeys or their faith journeys, their spiritual lives or practices, as distinct from those of us living closer to it, in the United States in a diocese?
We have an all-volunteer force, and so they're coming from American families. They're coming from our society. And so what we find in the military is about the same percentage of Catholics as we find in the American society, same percentage of Protestants. But probably the largest group are those with no religious preference, and I believe that to be about 40%. So that means that, the military is a large mission territory. And so the spiritualities, some are very fervent and very devout, others not so. And so we come as chaplains to reach out to serve everybody. The chaplains are not about death, we're about life for everybody and to the fullest. Not only for those in our countries, but even for our adversaries as well. So yes, we have the gospel of life. We belong to Jesus, and people in the military, like people in the world, they need the Lord.
One of the things that strikes me is that women and men in the military face deep sacrifices every day, whether it's being temporarily deployed, whether it's taking a position of some danger. They face sacrifices every day. We're in the middle of Lent, almost in the middle of Lent. How do your chaplains, how does the Archdiocese guide people that are giving so much and sacrificing so much into this season of sacrifice and make it a distinct season sort of that can lead them to a deeper renewal when their life is sacrifice?
We're preparing in the season of Lent to celebrate the greatest mystery of our faith, which is the Paschal mystery, the passion, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. And in this mystery, we see a paradox between sacrifice and suffering and glory. And so that's what we believe, that people make this mystery a part of their lives, and they emerge from their sufferings and their sacrifices better people and better Christians. And so, during the Ash Wednesday services, chapels are packed. It might be one of the best attended liturgies that we have throughout the year. And on Ash Wednesday, I don't know if you listen to the opening prayer at the Ash Wednesday. They talk about a military campaign. They talk about doing battle with spiritual evil and using the weapon of self-denial. And this is the language that the military is very familiar with. And so, yes, I would say that Jesus' love for us is measured in sacrifice.
Have you been able to celebrate, thinking about Lent and thinking ahead to Easter, have you been able to celebrate Easter and the Easter sacraments, either overseas or with military personnel on their bases? Is there anything that's different about those liturgies, or anything more celebratory, or anything that's we might not experience, or any stories that you would want to share from any of those Easter sacraments of your time with servicemen and women and their families?
Well, I deployed to Baghdad, Iraq with the 1st Armored Division back in the spring of 2003. We followed in behind the 3rd Infantry Division that had, fought their way to Baghdad, and then we conducted a relief in place with them. And we were told we were going to be there 365 days. So I was with 2 other priests, Father Stadola, Father Niemiller. And the 3 of us, we were the priests for Task Force Baghdad. There were 29 FOBs, forward operational bases. And so we came up with a plan to visit all 29 of these bases every week. Well, that meant 3 masses on Saturday and 3 on Sunday. So we were busy. But at the beginning, we also told them, we're going to be here for a whole year. So if you need sacraments, if you want to become Catholic, baptism, First Communion, confirmation, or if you just need First Communion and confirmation, let's get started on this. So we had 71 people sign up for our sacramental preparation class, a few on each one of these fobs. And we work with them every weekend with the lessons. And at the end of the year, we had 57 that were able to be participate in the sacraments of initiation at Easter. It was just wonderful. But it was different. I mean, they came to Mass with their pistols and their rifles and their machine guns. And, it was still a dangerous place. So we can't say it wasn't. Right. But they were able to participate in the sacramental life of the church.
You have a long military career, or a military career prior to you being ordained priest and bishop. This is, as Pope Francis would say, a shepherd who knows the smell of his sheep. Could you say just a little bit about your preparation for your chaplaincy in your life before you became a priest?
I went to the university right across the street here, and I was in ROTC, the Reserve Officer Training Corps. And so the same day I received my diploma, I was commissioned a second lieutenant. And I served in the Army as an infantry officer and as a transportation corps officer. So I had 7 years of service. But during those 7 years, I kept thinking about the priesthood. I started thinking about it my senior year of college. And so I was discerning the call, so to speak. But, maybe during those 7 years, I thought it was my idea, and then I began to realize this isn't my idea. I think God is calling me to this vocation. So I resigned the commission and started talking to vocation directors. Today, we have vocation discernment retreats for those who are wearing the uniform and serving their country and thinking about the priesthood.
Did I read once that your prayer life may have started when you were jumping out of planes? Or did it start
Well,
before then?
that was very accurate. Well, I was praying before that. But
that's good.
Yes, when you're going to jump out of a perfectly good airplane, you find yourself praying with greater intensity. Yes, so before that green light would come on, I do remember some fervent praying, yes.
Both Pope Francis and Pope Benedict had written some things about the chaplaincy or about the military life. And I wanted to just read you one from Pope Francis and then ask for your response if I could. Pope Francis said that many soldiers return from war operations or peacemaking missions with real inner wounds. War can leave an indelible mark in them. The role of the chaplain is to accompany them and support them in their journey as a fraternal and comforting presence. Your Excellency, could you share your insights, please, on the important role of chaplain as accompanying, supportive, fraternal presence? And have you encountered a profound story of someone touched by your or your chaplain's accompanying and fraternal love?
When we had returned from Iraq, we started having meetings at our installation and at our chapel. And so people that may have been struggling with PTSD could meet with other soldiers. Now remember, I was Army. They would meet with other soldiers. And at the lunch hour at the chapel, over a little pizza and some soda, and so being with one another and talking about their experiences. So it was a support group. And so, yes, we do meet in a fraternal way, and we try to accompany them. And what our Archdiocese has been doing is working with the Knights of Columbus. And so the Supreme Knight, Carl Anderson, and Archbishop Broglio have been leading an American delegation of wounded warriors to participate in the international military pilgrimage to Lourdes, France, every May. They've been doing this for the last 4 years now. And we have another group going this coming May. And of course, Lourdes is known as a place of healing. You know, I was talking to one Medal of Honor recipient from the Vietnam War, and he was telling me that, this was something that he had to struggle with. He says, I grew up Catholic. I knew the 10 Commandments, and that 5th commandment is a hard one because, well, I did my job out there. And I says, yeah, I know. You saved your comrades out in the field battle. And he says, yeah, but it's just hard to live with what I did out there because I know the 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill. And so, yeah, people do struggle with the moral ramifications of what we have to do as we try to protect our country. And it should always be a last resort. Yes.
But it's a unique call for the chaplain to be with and to accompany those who are confronting that moral dilemma.
Yes,
and to show
have that
them.
conversation with them and to talk to them about it. Because our chaplains, well, they have the words of Christ. Where else might they hear the words of Christ but from our chaplains?
Bishop Buckon, can you tell me, in celebrating holidays, especially Easter, when in like a conflict zone or someplace where the personnel are under a lot of stress, whether there's imminent danger or there's concern that there might be something happening, do you find that their sense of celebration for the sacraments, whether that's Mass or reconciliation or the Easter holidays, if that celebration is heightened, if it's amplified in those areas where there might be a little concern that this could be, the last one, or that it could be a little bit dangerous?
Before we crossed the border from Kuwait and into Iraq, where we were going to convoy up to Baghdad, that was in the spring of 2003. So the night before we crossed the border, I was going to celebrate Mass. And I expected the regular Catholic crowd. I was surprised to find that everybody in the camp was Catholic that day, Everybody turned out.
No atheists in foxholes?
There were no atheists in the foxholes. And then during the communion rite, Diane, I have to admit, I was kind of shocked because I began to realize there are people that are making their first Holy Communion here. But the lesson learned was every soul yearns for immortality. They were going into harm's way. They wanted to connect with their Creator. Up in Baghdad, there were times when I was celebrating Mass on Sunday night. There were 3 Sundays in a row when we were celebrating Mass and rockets came in and kind of rocked our world. Now, this happened during the Liturgy of the Word. So I didn't have to worry about having the sacred species on the altar. And so we just simply said, all right, everybody into the bunker. So we scrambled into the bunker, and then once we got the all clear, we came back out and we resumed the Mass. But, Diane, I couldn't help but to notice people were praying a little harder, and their eyes were a little wider open. I think the shock of being shot at and missed had brought them to a new state of consciousness. And, you begin to think about the eternal verities. So again, to be there with what our church has to offer. The risen Lord, Jesus, our salvation, who has already won the victory for us. Now, during the Easter season in 2008, so I went back 5 years later for Lent and for Easter. A couple things about Lent. One is you don't put the ashes on the forehead. So you put the cross and the ashes on the wrists. So people would lift up their sleeves and you put the ashes there, and you begin to celebrate Ash Wednesday and Lent with the sign not in the traditional location for practical purposes. And but then during Easter, I was up in Balad, so a town north of Baghdad, and it was well, kind of an experience of the universal church, because we not only had the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, because it was a joint base, but we also had the contractors that were present. So we had people from Africa, from Uganda. We had people from Asia, from the Philippines. You know, the Filipinos were working the laundry. People from India, they were contracted to be our cooks. And so we had the universal church in this camp, celebrating the Easter mysteries. And so anyways, with great joy and celebration. But of course, the danger was always present, because, you know, Al-Qaeda might pay a local to fire a mortar into our camp every now and then. And so for a little money, they'll do this. And they would tell us, well, we fire into your camp because we can make a little money this way, you know. But anyways, so it was always, the threat was there, but the celebration of our faith was even greater than the threat.
What is the one thing that you would have listeners, viewers take away from your service, the service of the military personnel, the faith of those whom you serve, that can be food for us as we listen?
Yeah. Well, I think it's that, again, the mystery of Easter, the Paschal mystery. What happened to Jesus on Good Friday, you might ask yourself, well, why do we call that good? I mean, Jesus was put to a gruesome death on Good Friday. But it was while he was dying on the cross that he was saving us. But from that passion and death came the glory of the resurrection. And the great lesson there is that God can bring good out of any situation. We might not always know what that good is going to be, but it's important for us to place our trust in God. And maybe even before we discover what the good is, we can even thank God for what God's going to do. Because as long as we stay faithful, God will continue to amaze us with how he brings good out of these situations in our lives. So our wounded warriors should not lose faith. We need to encourage them to continue to place their trust in a God who saves and can bring good out of every situation. And that's the wonderful message of Easter, you know. That's what helps keep so many of our wounded warriors resilient as they continue to live with a new normal, a new way of living. Easter is a message of hope and promise for the future, because we place our trust in a God who has our interests at heart. He loves us. He has great things in store for us. And so we, as chaplains, are always preaching this gospel with joy and with hope.
Bishop Buckon, thank you so much for being with us this morning. And I wish you and our listeners a happy rest of their Lent and a very blessed Easter. Thank you.
To all of the viewers of Shalom TV throughout the world, I want to encourage you not only to support this amazing media apostolate, but to spread the word to others. We all know how the internet and mass media are polluting the world with the poison of pornography and so much other forms of materialism. This is the source of eternal life, the gospel, and Shalom TV is consecrated to spreading the word of Christ. Thank you.